Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I've got Adam on, Adam Lison. Adam was a Royal Marine Commando, served 22 years. He's an author and he's got a book coming out in October. It's called A Royal Marine Commando in Iraq and Afghanistan. It tells a story about his time there, about surfing, about his life. I've read some of the little snippets that are online of it at the moment, and it sounds really interesting. One little snippet was, blown up 22 times by IEDs or IED incidents. That's Jesus Christ. Adam was also mentioned in dispatches for his bravery in Afghanistan, and I hope we'll be talking about that shortly. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Andy.
It's great you've been on, mate, honestly, especially considering such short notice. That's the quickest flash to bang I've ever had someone come on a podcast, to be honest.
I work off the fly, mate, so it's all good.
Right, okay, so the questions I've got for you are just the same as what I asked for everyone, and everyone who listens to the podcast knows what they are, but I'll go over them again. So it's, where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? So if you just like to start off with giving us a bit of background of like yourself, where you grew up, and what drew you to the military.
So I was born in Solihull, so a little town just outside of Birmingham, and I grew up in a town called Redditch. So if you know the country of the UK well, it's just off the M42, which is the southern side. I had a really good childhood. My mum and dad were awesome, really supportive, never pushy, and got into lots of water sports. Did lots of like generic sports as well. Rugby, football, and all that kind of thing. A lot of my friends were really heavily into following football. But I went on holiday when I was about 13 years old to Wales, Tenby, so just around the freshwater west, sort of like the southwest of Wales area. And at the time I was kind of like into windsurfing. We'd been on a holiday to Spain, and my dad had bought some chunky old school 80s 90s windsurfing kit, and we kind of enjoyed doing that. And then one day while we were walking down the beach, I saw a couple of guys in the water, and they were catching waves, and I was like, that's amazing. And everything that I could get hold of, whether it was magazines, whether it was VHS videos, I tried to get as much content as possible and take it on board, and it just became an obsession. I was playing a decent level of rugby, as well as I was just playing club level, county level. And, as I got to sort of like the end of my high school, GCSEs and all that sort of thing, I picked up a scholarship playing for Worcester, which would have been Worcester Warriors when professional rugby was turning from amateur to semi-professional to professional. And as I got to the end of my my school time, I took on my GCSEs, and I got told I was going to fail them, but I studied really hard, ended up passing them all, and went on to my A levels. And I did psychology, PE, and geography. And I purely did geography just because my geography teacher was my tutor. And he told me, nah, you're going to fail your GCSEs. So I did geography basically just to spite him anyway. I love psychology. I loved anything to do sort of like the mental game. And then back then there wasn't really like sports psychology or anything like that. And this is sort of like the mid to the late 90s. And I really enjoyed sort of like the mental aspect about like how to prepare for games, what made you nervous, and all that kind of thing. long story short, I was seeing a girl, and she was in the same psychology class as me. She used to take the mick out of me for not being able to pick things up too quickly, and it just kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit. Kind of going back a little bit as well. My granddad was in the Polish Special Forces during the Second World War.
Wow.
So he met my nan, who was from Wales. She was a singer, and they met. My dad came along, and then he became a officer in the Fusiliers. But that was primarily not necessarily to serve, but it kind of like helped him gain a stepping stone into the business world, because he was working at Land Rover at the time, and Rover, which was kind of one of the biggest car manufacturing companies and producers in Birmingham, and it kind of gave him a foothold from being sort of like, the factory fodder to being on the into the corporate level. So, we had a bit of family background leading all the way back to the Second World War, but that was never really kind of like an inspiration to leaning into the military. One of my best friends at school, his uncle was in the Royal Marines and then into the SBS, and he used to tell us stories when he come home from leave about like the Royal Marines and all the stuff that he was up to. And it was quite inspiring. And altogether, there was about 11 or 12 of us at school, in our little friendship group. And we're like, yeah, we're going to join the Marines. We're going to join the Marines. And I was the only one that ended up joining up in the end. So, towards sort of like, kind of going back forward a little bit, as I came to the end of my high school career, I did that first year of my A-levels. And I was like, I just had enough of school and the education system. And I was training for Hereford and Worcester County, and one of the coaches came over, and I always thrived on playing a game of rugby, like actually doing the thing. He came over to me one day and he goes, Ads, look, rugby's not fun, it's serious. And as soon as he said that, it just like sparked something in me. And I was like, that, but it's a sport. It's supposed to be fun. And that was kind of like my kind of like calling card. So, a couple of days later, I didn't even tell my mum and dad. Went up to the careers office and asked to join the Royal Marines. And I wanted to join as an officer originally, because back then I had the grades to do it. And the Navy guy there basically turned around and said, "Nah, you don't want to be a Rupert. You want to be, you want to join in the ranks." So I did a few pull-ups and press-ups and passed them all. So I was pretty fit. I'd been training in Spit and Sawdust gym since I was about 13 years old, and I was pretty fit from playing like lots of sport and stuff. So I kind of passed that with a bit of flying colours. Did my entry exams into the Navy, and Bob's your uncle, and that's basically in a nutshell how I became to join in the Royal Marines.
Do you think you were prepared for what was to come? Not just physically, but mentally.
Not at all. Not even in the slightest. Like, I had absolutely no idea that the Royal Marines Commandos was an endurance-based force. So, you're doing lots of miles all the time. Sub 7-minute mile pace, runs, load carries, and they're not like short tabs like you would do like in the. I'm not say short tabs like you do in the paras or the army, but they were long and enduring ones. They were things like you were walking up onto the training areas, and when you were out on exercises, you jumped to each individual thing, and they were absolutely miles away. So from a physical perspective, because I didn't understand about how to become an endurance athlete, and it takes a long time to change your body to do that, I was built for sprinting and power and short, sharp movements, not like long endurance running and stuff like that. I ended up going down and doing my potential Royal Marines course, which is at the time was about a 3-day course. You went down to the Commando Training Centre in Lympstone, and Did the endurance course, did the bleep test, did the 1.5 mile run, did the bottom fields assault course, and all these were timed and you got marked, and it was a pretty grueling pass or fail course. I ended up scraping a pass, and a few months later I was invited back to start recruit training, and I was a deer in headlights. I ended up doing my PMC when I was 17, and then I was 18 years old when I ended up going into full recruit training. And, there were guys there that were a lot older than I. I mean, it's the stereotype, right? You rock up at the train station, you're looking left and right, and there's these big meatheads and like these guys, and they look like, yeah, these are proper warriors. And there's little scrawny 5'6" me, don't know my arsehole from my eyelid, and I'm like, what's going on here? And it was quite intimidating, to say the least. But I didn't want to be the guy that just turned around and said, like, I'm going to give up. I'm just going to keep going. And it was scary. Back then, I mean, yourself from serving, you got shouted at quite a lot, and I was just scared to do anything. When we were being taught to do stuff, if you didn't do it in a specific way or learn it correctly or learn it first time, you just got thrashed. And because I wasn't particularly endurance-based fit, I was still fit, but I wasn't like, endurance-based fit. I kind of started recruit training sort of like on the back foot. So I was just super fatigued all the time, and it just had like a massive detrimental effect on me, where, I was told I was shit all the time. I was never passing out of training, and I just felt like I was hated by the training team. So when people ask you, like, did you enjoy it? I didn't enjoy it. I endured it. I just got through training. I got back trooped a couple of times, so re-recruit trooped because of my attitude. I have a really laid back attitude. I suppose you could blame surfing being quite laid back. So I had quite a laid back attitude, and it looked like I've always got resting bitch face. So my expression on my face never really changes that much.
Yeah.
So it just looked like I was never trying that much, but like inside I was trying really hard. It just wasn't coming across that I was. So a couple of my section instructors didn't particularly like that, and so in the end I ended up doing 11 months in recruit training instead of 8. So
it's a long old time, that, like.
Yeah, it was. And, it's quite funny. I was reflecting on this the other day, actually, because I've been looking at photos and doing all the marketing for the book. And I've got pictures of like me, my mum and my dad. My two mates from school came down, and my sister. And you just look at my face, and I'm just like I look broken. And you talk to a lot of people when they get to their pass outs, and they've done something particularly special, especially Royal Marines Commando training. Everybody's like, "Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, this is awesome," and everyone's like super happy. When I got to the end, I was like, "Dude, just get me to a unit. I've had enough. I want to get out of Lympstone." The irony behind it is I live literally 1.5 miles down the road from the Commando Training Centre. So if you'd have asked me 26 years later, earlier, if I, would you think you'd be living down the road? I'd have said absolutely not, no chance.
Did your family notice a difference after?
I have no idea. I never went home.
Right.
As soon as I flew the cuckoo's nest, that was pretty much me. I did go home on the first couple of leave periods. I ended up going home, and going forward a little bit, I came home from Iraq, and I went back to I got a taxi back to my old childhood house, and I knocked on the door, and like this random woman opened the door, and I was like, "Is Caroline and Eddie there?" And I said, "Oh no, they moved a few months ago. My mum and dad, over the blues and stuff, hadn't got through, or they just forgot to tell me that they'd moved house, and they'd moved house like just down the road." So yeah, that's you can
I
kind of
know,
get a flavour of how much contact I had.
yeah, I know that exact feeling, mate. I come out of basic training, went home, and my sister was living in the house, and I was like, "Where's mum and dad?" Oh, they moved. I was like, "Have they?" Because we weren't allowed letters. We didn't get any letters while I was in basic training. And I was like, "Well, where have they moved to?" They said, "Oh, Grantham." I was like, "Where the fucking hell's that? I'm from Hartlepool. I had no clue where Grantham was." They said, "Oh, it's in Lincolnshire." I was like, "Don't even know where that is."
And
So
this wasn't because like we didn't get on together. Like
no, I
I've
get it. I
always got
totally
on
get it.
like a
Yeah.
house on fire, but I've always been quite an individual person. You could argue now having a wife and kids and stuff, still kind of little bit like as an individual person can be quite selfish in your own way, I guess. And yeah, I have to. Sometimes I'm like that. Oh yeah, shall I call mom and dad, or like shall I get in touch with them? It's easier these days because isn't it? Because you've got mobile phones and stuff like that. But back in the day, you didn't really have a mobile phone, and the e-blues took anywhere between. Well, blues used to take between 2 and 6 weeks. Sometimes you'd send letters when you're away, and you'd get home before they got there. So yeah, it was a bit strange.
My mum used to send me stamped, self-addressed envelopes so that I'd write back to her because I'd just forget. When you're that, 17, 18, 19, out on a piss, you just forget to keep in touch with people. So they used to send us self-addressed envelopes just as a reminder to give them a ring. You know what I mean? So when you passed out with training and then you went to, which unit did you go to?
I opted to go to the Fleet Protection Group, which was called Camacho Group at the time. So it was up in Faz Lane on the west coast of Scotland, looking after the British nuclear arsenal. So it was up over in what was it called? Her Majesty's or His Majesty's Base, Clyde or something like that. Yeah, so I ended up going up there, and this was a rotation between three different locations.
Yeah.
One being the main area where the Trident nuclear warheads are kept, and then a couple of them were kind of like a little bit further around, and they're all kind of like different levels of like QRF. If the base got attacked. So I did about 10 months there, and at the time, maritime interdiction was part of the unit's job. So going away, doing MIOPS, doing board and search operations all around the world, short-term training teams as well. So STTs, going to places like Chile, all around the world, all around the Commonwealth, training different forces in commando tactics and warfare. So I'd done the courses for that, but I never ended up getting put on a team, and because it was kind of one of those brown nosing sort of situations where other lads got on with like the troop sergeants and stuff, and then they got put onto the teams, and I wasn't particularly like that. I was still a sprog, really. Like I hadn't even done a year, and I was still struggling with my fitness, even though after I passed out of training. I got made to go to the gym like three times a week. 3 times a day, because I call it the troop handbrake. I was one of a handful of troop handbrakes, so whenever we went out for like 4 mile runs, I always drop back on it. I genuinely, like, if it was any faster than the 10-minute mile pace, I always really struggled with it, which is like later on in my career was one of the reasons why I became a PTI, is so I didn't have to run fucking 500 miles everywhere. So, yeah, I ended up getting a SWAF draft then, because I wasn't getting onto those MIOP teams to do my anti-tanks course. So heavy weapons anti-tanks, and at the time it was we used the Milan and the Myra. So Myra being thermal optics for the Milan. Was it thermal or infrared? It was infrared. and then the heavy machine gun as well, and GPM GSF. So I went down and did that course, and then once I completed that course, we all got drafted up to 4-5 Commando because we'd been on a bit of leave, and I was at my mate's house, and long story short, the Twin Towers got hit and came down. So, all of us got drafted up to 4-5 Commando, and within 6 months of passing my anti-tanks course, going up to 4-5 Commando, joined X-Ray Company. We were out in the Hindu Kush looking for the Taliban, and the east side of Kabul, like on the Pakistan border, going through the caves and the mountains looking for Taliban and weapon caches and such.
Oh, I think everyone thinks about Afghanistan and Iraq usually after 2003. A lot of people forget that we had troops there before 2003. You know what I mean? And I'm guilty of that. You can't. I wouldn't say gloss over them, but it's like in people's minds, it's the later tours, the American tours that people think about. They don't think about the tours before. I mean, they weren't even called up.
No, so it was called Operation Jacana. It was part of the Americans' Operation Enduring Freedom. So it was kind of called Operation Enduring Freedom. Up Jacana was kind of like the British term for it. So in a way, it was kind of a joint operation between the Yanks and us.
Yeah.
However, we were basically like there was an element of 40 Commando out there, and they were basically doing base security and a little bit of support security for the SF group. So I think the SAS and SBS were out in theatre because we were based in Bagram Air Base, and it wasn't like when we ended up landing there, it wasn't like I guess you could say like Bastion was, where everything was concreted. This was an old Russian airfield on the northwest side of Kabul that the Russians had used, and it was basically they just left it. And what they'd done was they'd flown over it and littered it with anti-personnel mines so it couldn't be used. So there was a small group of coalition forces, from ISAF that had gone out there and basically were like clearing the area out. So there was an American part to it, and then there was kind of like the British part to it, which is kind of where we were. So the Yanks, as typically we were in all these Gucci tents, and we were in fucking 24x18s, living off cot beds, just put up in the middle of like a flat dirt pan. But when we were there, we were told that we weren't to step off the hard standing because there was still anti-personnel mines everywhere, and every single day there were people getting blown up by anti-personnel mines, and there was constant coalition engineers like clearing the areas around the runways to get rid of all the anti-personnel mines, so the area was clear. So yeah, there was constant like booms and stuff going off where we were kind of like hanging out there.
I mean, this is your first tour. You're going to grow up pretty quickly. I mean, like, did you put no pre-deployment training for that, or just straight onto it?
No, like we'd done like a little bit. We'd done a little bit of mountain training. The reason why 4-5 Commander got sent out to on up Jacana to go up the Hindu Kush and the Pakistan border up the mountains was because 4-5 Commander was renowned as like the mountain unit, so like the mountain commando group, just purely because it was in Scotland. All the other commando units still did mountain training, still did Arctic warfare training. It was just because they were up in Scotland and had the reputation for it. So that's really why 4-5 got the go ahead for that for no other reason. But yeah, I think I was 20 then, so I was still very green. I'd only done basically about just over a year outside of recruit training, and yeah, here I was in the middle of we landed in We went to Dubai. We landed in Kazakhstan, and and in the middle of Bagram Air Base. And to be honest with you, like, and I've wrote about this in the book. I genuinely, like, there's times I had absolutely no idea where I was in Afghanistan. I just literally got, so I was point man for my section and my troop. So I basically got told by my section commander, hey, if he was like that, right, see that tree up there? Fucking walk to that. So I'm up there like that, walking up these mountains and stuff, and I get to the tree, right, like, you're going that way, and that was pretty much it. We had no inkling in, like, what the mission was, or I don't remember it, never been told it. So, when we came to the end of the tour, I got quite friendly with a few of the signalers, and kind of started to do a little bit of spy shit and try and pull a bit of information out of them, so I actually kind of, like, knew what was going on. And that was one of the things that I took later through my career, was that, when I became a commander and I became a corporal and a sergeant, was to make sure that everybody knew what was going on, because the worst thing in the world is, like, sitting in the middle of a fucking sandbox getting shot at, not knowing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, it was a real growing up moment, I guess you could say. I still didn't really kind of, like, I guess, knew who I was. And going through recruit training as well, a lot of my peers there were, like I mentioned earlier, were a lot older, and one of them was actually a sergeant in the Legion, and he'd done a lot of kinetic operations in Africa. And he became one of my best friends when I was in training. He had a flat in Exeter with his wife, so he was sort of like, early 30s, and I was 17, 18 years old at the time, and going around to his house at the weekends when we had a bit of time off and having some dinner. And he had all of these photos all over his wall of him, like, walking up these Cypriot mountains and, in the jungle, skinning, like, 20-foot pythons and stuff like that. And here I am, like that, going, yeah, that's awesome, mate. Nice, yeah.
You forget. I mean, I forget as well. When I joined at 16, during the ladies' regiments as we had back then. So I joined up. Everyone was the same age, type of thing. The Marines have always recruited older. The age limit was a lot higher than the Army was. It's in par now, but I think it was like up to 33 that you could join the Marines. And back in the day, like, you couldn't do that in the Army. I think it was 25 or 26. I mean, something around there. I'm not sure. So I've had guys mention it before that have gone into training with the Marines, and there's such an age gap between the recruits, and some people, find it don't. Did you find that the older guys helped the younger guys, or was it not like that for you at all?
Nah, not at all. We're all in the the same pot together, regardless of how old you were. Everybody, at the end of the day, you're a bootneck, you're a Raw Marines commando. Your friends and oppos foremost, and comrades. So you helped each other out. If someone was struggling, it was always the ethos, to help them out and push them forward, and trying to kind of, like, help them out in whatever they were doing. But yeah, I mean, that tour was that first tour was particularly difficult, because we were operating between 10 and was it 10 and 15,000 feet? Between 10 and 20,000 feet. So kind of like, without sounding too extreme, like, the most extreme features we were going up to were nearly about the same height as Everest Base Camp. So, some of those mountains up there are, like, are pretty high, and they were really steep as well. So, like, quite grainy, lots of crumbling, like, sides to them. But there are also, like, some really kind of, like, beautiful valleys going through it. So, I've always said this: Afghanistan is probably one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to, and I've traveled quite extensively, and just kind of the different landscapes of the mountains, the green zone, and the cities and the culture. If it wasn't such a hotbed of like evil people, I think it would be absolutely amazing. And the old hippie trail used to go, didn't it, from the western side of Europe all the way through Afghanistan and the Middle East through towards like China and the East Coast. And during sort of like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it must have been a wonderful place to go through, and you must have seen some absolutely amazing sights.
So on that tour that you've gone, did you find anyone? For want of a better question, did you find anyone? Did you come into contact on that tour?
So we only ever came under contact once, and it wasn't really from the Taliban. It was from some local warlords, and we'd bivvied up for the night in a wadi, and it must have been some younger guys from this warlords kind of group, and they basically did a drive-by on us. I remember I was sitting under like this little we were sitting in this desert wadi, but where we got positioned, it was kind of like a little mangrove. There was like some taller trees and greenery around and stuff. And I remember sitting there, and these guys, because we were in the bottom of this wadi, and we had sentry positions up on the high bits, but sometimes there were quite some dead ground, and you couldn't really see what was going on. And these guys come bombing along in a one of the white Toyota cars, and had about 3 or 4 AKs just pointing out the windows and just hosed down the area where we were. So that was my sort of first contact, really, was sitting down having a cup of tea and spinning a few dits, and then all of a sudden you've got AK fire coming down with a snap and the thump, and rounds like landing in and around you. And then that led into a deliberate company operation stroke attack into the local village, which was pretty scary, because I was then the point man of the company at the pointy tip of the spearhead, going towards this village that we had no idea wasn't really Taliban held, but we were going towards it. It was just at dusk when this happened, and so as we pushed towards the village, it turned to night, and I think like we didn't have MVGs then. We hadn't got them issued. I think it was just CWSs and Sophies that the snipers had. So I was looking out the corner of my eye, using my cones and my rods and my eyes, trying to get as much light into it, like walking towards, go towards that feature there. And all I remember with that is I just remember seeing little red dots that were on the buildings, and I thought it was like Chechen snipers with like MVGs, and it was like the MVG light on their eyes, and they were just waiting for us to get close enough to vet us up, and I was absolutely shitting myself.
Understandably.
But we ended up going into the village, and it just turned out that these lads hadn't really cleared the chute through the warlord, and it ended up being nothing. But we still got shot at, and it still, wasn't the greatest thing in the world.
So what was it like returning from there
then? It was I don't like using the term mental health and stuff like that. But I think it was the first time mentally that I remember going to I remember coming back, and it was a couple of days after I think we'd been back in country for about a week, and we'd been away for ages, so I'd been given like 10 weeks off. And I remember the first night back, I went out with my mate Ian, and we went into Solihull. So Solihull at the time was quite vivid nightlife with like university students. And we went to this uni bar because he was studying to become an architect. So we were hanging out with some of his mates, and the busier he got, and the more people like crammed into the pub. It was like back in the day with the clubs and stuff, people banging into you when they were pissed and stuff like that. And it was just making me angrier and angrier. And I ended up having to kind of put my pint down. I said, mate, I got to go. I ended up going outside, and I started to get like quite emotional, and I couldn't really I couldn't really figure out what was affecting me so much. I think it was just like being in such a high stress situation, like walking up and down these mountains. And like, look, I'm not lying. We didn't have any body armor. Your CBA is not body armor. It's a bit of cardboard wrapped around you to keep your insides in if you get blown up. So we had none of that. So I was walking up and down these mountains with literally just my webbing, my weapon, a little bit of warmer's kit in my Bergen and my day sack, and the rest of it was like full of ammunition, full of grenades, 66s, spare 50 cal ammo, carrying some of the Milan tubes and stuff like that. And we were walking up and down these mountains, and it was absolutely horrific, and you never knew, if you were going to come into contact or not. And if we'd come into contact there, I think we'd have been fucking trouble because we weren't SF. We didn't have any all the SF assets or anything like that. It would have took them ages to come up. And so I remember standing outside, and I think that's when it just started to decompress for me a little bit. Because there's no such thing as decompression then, like not even slightly. So that was my first time doing that, and I didn't go away traveling on that leave period, and that was the first and only leave period that I'd never been away anywhere. And I just got drunk a lot, and all my civvy mates, there was a big group of us that we hung around together from school. They kind of disowned me in a way because I was becoming not quite violent but quite threatening as a drunk. Little things like, there's a running joke with the Royal Marines band. So if you tell someone you're a Royal Marines commando and someone says, what instrument do you play? It's a bit of a funny because you're not in the Royal Marines band. And little things like that used to wind me up. But I remember pinning a couple of my mates up against the wall and in a really nice Italian restaurant. That lost me a lot of friends, to be fair. And so, I say it didn't affect me that much, but then I understood what was going on after that, and I've always been quite self-aware of those sorts of things, and so moving on to other tours and stuff, I could understand what was going on a little bit more.
So what was next for you after you had done that back at the unit?
So I ended up going to 4-2 Commando, and so in fact that's a lie. We got back from Upchikana, and I then went for recce selection. I had no idea why I did that, because that's even running even faster than recruit training, and I was hanging out on that one. And a lot of my friends said that was like the hardest 4-5 recce selection ever, even the instructors. It probably wasn't. They're probably just making me feel better. So I went on recce selection, and then all the shit went down about Iraq. And then so 9 months after we came back from Ochakana, we were then prepping to go out to for the invasion of Iraq. And everyone's heard of SFSG, Special Forces Support Group. So, back then there wasn't a Special Forces Support Group. It was called CAP 2. And it was basically like you were the support for the SF. So we ended up going out to Cyprus in support of them. And whenever they flew out anywhere into Iraq, this is before the invasion, we were there to support them on the ground. And it was very hush-hush. We were told we weren't allowed to take any cameras, take any pictures, weren't allowed to tell anyone, weren't allowed to phone home or anything like that. And then about halfway through the tour, about 3 weeks before the actual invasion, we did a emergency landing strip in the Al Jazeera Desert, which is the northwest of Iraq, so nearly on the border. So basically where the Euphrates goes from Iraq into Syria. So we were operating in the desert up there, and we set this landing zone up for the SAS and the SBS to land and then go off and do what they were doing. I think they were trying to locate Iraqi Republican Guard, which was like their special forces mechanized brigades. So they had like T-72 tanks, T-54, T-55s, APCs, and their recce vehicles were like little white Toyota Hiluxes. Funny old thing that being in the Middle East. Anyway, the SBS got bumped. The whole squadron got bumped to escape and evade, and then luckily they all got picked up and flown out. But because they'd lost a lot of the vehicles and a lot of their firepower and their kit and equipment, there was no we weren't really used anymore. The only thing out of that was, when we were the day after they'd all landed, we were on the ground and I was on the Milan, and one of the recce group type Hiluxes rocked up and was probably about a couple of 100 meters away, but you couldn't really see it because of the haze, because it was so hot. And I asked to fire at it because I could identify a weapon, but because nobody had been in the contact or anything like that, the hierarchy of the company were quite reluctant to do it. Plus, it was probably giving away our position as well. Luckily, anyway, the next day when we were flying out, I noticed there was like a big mirage. It looked like a big, like a really long sort of like grey triangle on the horizon, and I kept flagging this up and saying like this, it's really odd. Anyway, when we ended up flying out, the Western Republican Guard, over like 1,000 to 2,000 troops, tanks, APCs, they were all lined up, and they were getting ready just to basically roll over our position. We had no vehicles on the ground. We had 2 quads, which were like, Shanks's pony and the ammunition around the secured area that we were. So as we flew off, you could see all the lights and see all like these tanks all lined out. And I think if we'd been there any longer, yeah, I may not have been
quite
here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, hell. That's something that I didn't really know about. I knew that, stuff like that had happened, but didn't give it much thought. I was there 2003 with 3RHA, and we always think, we were the first ones into Iraq and stuff like this. We were there at the beginning. And you forget that, the SF had been there for quite a while, doing their bit.
Yeah, I mean, they were bouncing in and out. You just didn't hear out. You didn't really, hear about it. There's the guy called Damien Lewis who's written all the SAS books about Paddy Mayne and stuff. He wrote a full book about it. It's not part fiction, but the names in it are fictionalized, obviously for obvious reasons. But it gives a little bit of better account of what actually happened, and it's quite interesting because when I was researching the book and putting the story in, because the stories in the book are all my personal opinion and experience, not so much about fact. It's like what I knew, how I felt, and kind of like what I experienced more than what everybody else did. So when I was kind of researching it, because I didn't really know too much about it, we'd been given like gold doubloons for like escape and evasion and some silk maps, and got taught how to read longitude and latitude, and just in case we got bumped and we had to escape and evade, to different countries like to Jordan and to Syria. At the time it was just kind of like a little bit of lip service, but actually, you think about it, the actual thing, could have really happened, and all the SF sort of incursion stuff that came before set up the invasion and all the targets and stuff while people were rolling through during the invasion. But that was kind of that was my end to that, because once the SBS guys got bumped, we were no longer required, so we ended up going back to Cyprus, sitting on our asses for a little bit. And then we got returned back to Free Commando Brigade. So we ended up flying back out to Kuwait. And then we went from Kuwait to Qasr, so the port that everybody landed in, like during the invasion. And then we started doing patrols from there, like just to kind of finish the tour out. So we were based in Qasar, and we were patrolling all the way up to the southern side of Basra, doing like anti-looting patrols and doing assurance patrols to like electricity and oil platforms and stuff, just to check like everything was all right and stuff like that, and making sure there wasn't any other there weren't like any militia or anything like that or incursions coming back in. And yeah, once that happened, we got flown back, and that was my Iraq tour basically.
It was a strange one, really. I mean, when the war ended, and Bush says we've won, we all of a sudden nothing. What should we do now? And then they put us into like, almost peacekeeping role, which was bizarre. A week before that, you were ready to kill everyone because there was no rules of engagement. It was war, and then all of a sudden, it's all changed. That's a weird thing to ask someone to do. That mindset that you've got to start with, you've got to switch it very quickly to not kill everyone who comes towards you because of the enemy.
Well, that's what happened during the latter ends of the Operation Herrick tours with a courageous restraint.
Yeah.
You're sending lads out to like fight, but you can't fight the enemy until they shoot at you, and then you kind of second guessing yourself: do I shoot or don't I shoot? Because I'm going to get into trouble. And anyway, like I basically told my lads, you feel. They've got a weapon and they pointed at you. You're fucking taking them down. There's no question about it. I'll deal with the stuff after that. Don't worry about it. Which
is the way it should have been. Courageous restraint was. I think it caused more issues, and even nowadays, it's rearing its head with the old warfare and lawfare stuff and all that. So, what was next for you after that one? After Optelic?
So I got drafted back. I asked for a draft to 4-2 Commando, so I ended up going there. And during this time, I was still surfing. So like after Optelic, I ended up go to Thailand, and I ended up surfing like down in Phuket, like right down in like the southwest side of Thailand. And I spent like a couple of months out there, like traveling around and surfing in different places. Don't know why I went to Thailand. I just think the lads had been talking about it to do the obvious things in Thailand. I didn't want any part of that, so I went and did a bit of traveling, sort of like on the coast, and had my board with me. So I did a little bit of that. Now I got drafted down to 4-2 Commando. Spent about 3 or 4 years there, like building up a rapport and building my training skills up. We then transitioned over from the Milan to in anti-tanks to Javelin, which was a fire and forget missile system. Had an amazing thermal capability on it. It was absolutely amazing. I was heavily involved then with the Navy surf team as well. So I managed to go on quite a few surfing trips with them. So like around Portugal, France, Spain, and places like that. So I was having a bit of a good time with it. I was taking my company for surfing adventure training, like down in Newquay, which is where I met my wife, my now wife. Everything was kind of like was going really well. And then I got picked up for promotion to become a corporal. So I went and did my anti-tank 2s course at Warminster. I did my junior command course back at the Commando Training Centre. And I'd been with M Company for pretty much all of my time there, so maybe 3 or 4 years. So I had a really good rapport with the lads, and coming back from from my juniors, I was pretty stoked to get back to the company and go and fight with the lads, and so they deployed out to Afghanistan early. I finished my juniors, went on summer leave, so went out to Bali with my girlfriend, my now wife. And we spent a month away doing that. Came back, did a couple of weeks of pre-deployment training, which was the biggest pile of turd I've ever been on in my life. It was basically like some pongos and paras telling us about all the contacts they'd been in with the paras up in Sangin, and basically telling us, doesn't matter what you do, lads, you're all going to die. It's pretty much what they said to us. So I was like, brilliant. And then I ended up flying out to Afghanistan. I landed in Bastion, middle of the night. We got told where we were going, and then I got told I was expecting to go back to Mike M Company again, and they told me I was going to J Company, which was out in Goresk. So if you know Helmand Province at all, you've got Garmasir, Lashkar from like the south, and then the middle of Afghanistan or the middle of Helmand, you've got a commercial town called Goresh, which is basically it runs over the Helmand River. You know, the town's in the middle of the Helmand River, a couple of bridges over it. And then it goes up to like Sangin and then Kajaki and, you know, Nowzad and Musakala and all those sorts of places. And I ended up joining J Company. So I got literally, I'd been on the ground I'd been in Afghanistan for about 10 hours. I got flown out to J Company again in the, it was like early morning. And he was like, are you Adam Lison? Yeah. And this was like a PTI called Tats. And he goes, right, follow me. Took me to my room. Right, get your head down. And I'll meet you in the galley in the morning. And Fob Price at the time was only really small. It was just kind of like a little outpost, probably like half. You could see the green zone from there, but it was not that far away from the main concrete road that goes all the way circles around Afghanistan. And so they're like, right, you've got a day to like familiarize yourself with the troop. And we were, so J Company were tasked with doing something called the Mobile Operations Group, which back then was basically like what the Desert Rats did in the Second World War. You know, the idea was we were going to drive into enemy territory, stir up a bit of a hornet's nest, destroy them, have a massive firefight, blow shit up, kill lots of people, kill lots of bad guys, then bug out again, and then do it again somewhere else. And that's what I ended up doing for 6 months. So literally, I'd say nearly 48 hours after I landed in Afghanistan on Herrick 5, I was in my first contact, which was interesting.
So what was that like? Well, I know you said earlier you'd been shot at when you were out in Afghan previously. Into an actual, returning fire, facing the enemy.
So it started off with our job, because we were based in Wimix, Land Rover machine gun platform. So you got the driver, and then in the passenger side, you got the commander side, and they've got a general purpose machine gun on there. And then on the back, we had, for the first half of the tour anyway, 50 cal machine guns. We were told up to fuck. We had loads of, there's 4 Wimix in our troop. And our job was to eliminate any threat to the rest of the footborne troops that were in the other 2 fighting troops, so that like the infantry sort of thing, like in small teams. So they'd go out on the ground, and we would also do security as well. So we go up onto the high ground and we dominate the area. And then if the lads got into a firefight, there's your fire support platform right there. We'd also go into the areas. So if they were patrolling into a village, we'd take a WMIC with us. And if they got into a firefight, we would just fucking decimate everything. That was the idea and what we did. So the first contact that we had was I was on top of this plateau just on the southern side of the Helmand River, and the lads were been dropped out at an A&A Afghan National Army barracks, which was in the middle of Goresh, and they were going to patrol through the town, down through over the 2 rivers, because they were only shallow at the time, because it was, on the edge of summer, and then walk back up the hill. And as we were walking back up the hill, there was a village probably about 900 meters away, and we started getting mortared, and it was just like really, it was always quite surreal. It was like little whistle and doosh, another whistle, doosh. I mean, like that. Where's that coming from? And before I deployed, I'd been to a shooting shop, and I'd bought a sniper scope. And because looking through your SUSAT at ×4 is pretty gash, So I had this scope that went up to about times 30. So it was sort of like if you held it in your hand at times 30, it was like the Blair Witch Project. Do you know what I mean? So I got this out, and I was just kind of trying to follow the path of the mortar that was coming in, and we pinged them. So we started putting loads of fire down onto this position. And as we were doing that, and we were waiting for the lads to come back up into the vehicle, so we could, once they got in, we were just going to bug out. But the Taliban had started to slowly sneak, really hide and sneak, crawl a little bit closer. Last man gets into the vehicle, and as we're bugging out, the guy pops out round the corner, lifts his rifle up. I just zap him, take him straight out. And this is 48 hours after being on the ground. Never been in a contact before, and you were the first person I've ever told that live. So yeah, and then we drove back and did the debrief, and I still didn't tell anyone about it. And so that was my second contact, but doing something about it.
It's quite surreal, really, isn't it? I'm here, all right, but I'm busy, and then something like that happens. And I suppose, for you, that role you were playing then, that became more commonplace.
But yeah, from then on, I'd say every time we went out onto the ground, not like it was sort of like mid-tours, this was the Wild West then. So everywhere we went, we renamed it Recce by Fire. What we would do is we'd just drive into places and try and make up a bit of a commotion. And, the really good combat indicators are when the women and kids start running out of the villages and stuff, you knew something was going to happen. The chimney smoke would start going up and all that sort of thing. And you just kind of and then, this is fucking so stupid, but we would just sit there and wait to get shot at. And then as soon as we got shot at, we'd just we'd take the whole thing out. And then once the contact was over, days, off we go. And, it was a frequent occurrence. I must have been in, I can't even say, it must have been over 100, 200 contacts in just that one tour, just doing stuff like that.
That's mental. I was in the artillery, so very, very different role. You know what I mean? It's I'm glad I never got close to anything like that. If we had to do something like that in the artillery, fucking something's gone wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
If they've got that far back. So that must, the adrenaline, the ups and downs. It's got to affect you while you're on the tour. Or did the training take over? Do you just crack on?
I'm not gonna lie to you, it was so fun. It sounds weird, but it
doesn't sound weird at all. It sounds normal. That's what we train for.
It was awesome. We were very lucky. Oh, I don't even need to touch wood. We were very lucky. In the whole tour, we took less than a handful of casualties. One of my friends. So the first night I said, I got my head down. I bedded down next to a lad called Scott Summers, young Marine, just passed out of training. Lovely lad, and I was convoy commander. We went up so we drove on into Bastion, and we were bringing resupply trucks back to Fob Price, and then they were getting taken over and going off to other places. And the Pinsgauer trucks that we used to have, they got armor plated, sort of a quarter of the way through, and the suspension on the Pinsgauers were pretty suspect, to say the least. And we were driving down, lights off, down the highway, and I just got the word stop. And what had happened was I was leading it, and I drove all the way back down, and the Pinsgauer rolled down the hill, but because it hadn't had a roof on, he basically the Pinsgauer rolled off the edge, gone off the edge of the road. Yeah. I don't really know what happened. I don't think he fell asleep, but just because it was dark, he must have just caught a wheel, and like it basically toppled the wagon over and it rolled down. But as he went down, the top of the windscreen, he was wearing a helmet as well, because you had to wear helmets when you had topless vehicles, which I didn't do, and I got told off a lot. But anyway, rolled down the hill and rolled over his head, and he was. Let's just say it wasn't in a great way. So, it wasn't like contact, but it was just little things like that happened.
It's shit as well. It's shit. I mean, similar thing happened to me years back. A friend of mine was killed when a warrior rolled over, and we were in Bosnia, and I found it harder to accept that. Previous to that, we'd lost someone in Ireland, got shot, and you kind of accept that because that's what you're there to do, and it's part of your job. But when somebody dies like that by an accident, I found it fucking. I wouldn't say heartbreaking, but I had more anger about that, really, because it's a waste type of thing. You're there, an accident. It's shit.
I've always been quite a realist with these sorts of things, and I do understand. I started to learn about the realities of war. You're always going to take casualties, kids, women. Yeah. You start to realise that the people that you're shooting at, and again I write about it in the book. You're killing these people, but you don't know. Their granddads or their dads, have they got kids? Their families. Were they Taliban? Were they just been told to do it? But if you start to think about these sorts of things when you're in those situations and you second guess yourself, then it's you that's not coming home. Yeah. So you can't in places like that. You can't really think of it like that. And going back to kind of the surfing thing, when I was instead of being like a typical Marine, which is like pissed on weapons and vehicles and stuff like that, and learning about different armaments and being all kind of like full in army or Marines, whatever you want to call it. Whenever I finished work, I was looking at surfing forecasts. I was watching the newest surfing DVD. I was out when the waves were rubbish, especially when I was down in Plymouth, because it was only sort of like 40 minutes away from the sea. I'd be out in the car parks, like surf skating, pretending I was surfing. A lot of my my downtime, and I call them my anchors now, were very much orientated around surfing. When I got back, I'd have like a little DVD player, and I'd watch surfing films like in Goresh and in Fob Price, or I'd get the latest surfing book or magazine sent out. So I wasn't like fully focused on the mission or whatever it is, inverted commas, like all the time. Like it was almost kind of like my escape, yeah. So, and the reason why I wanted to go back to M Company as well is because a lot of the people that I surfed with, my friends, especially my troop sergeant, was I'd surf with, and I'd been away on surf trips, and we shared the common bond with that, which they suffered a lot out in Afghanistan, especially like in Sangin and some other places. They took some horrific casualties when they were there. Again, that's not often spoken about. A lot of guys I know that left after that because it affected them deeply, because of stuff like that. Running up to the top of the roof on Sangin, and grenade machine gun rounds specifically being spotted, so it drops through the door and drops into the stairwell and it's taking the lads out as they're running upstairs and stuff like that. But surfing has always been my escape, and kind of what has made me very level-headed during those times of fighting and war.
So, I mean, the one thing I read about you, IED strikes, 22 of them. That's just greedy.
Well, I did try and save some for other people too.
Fucking hell, were you just unlucky or just at the
So at the end of Herrick 5, we were doing an operation called Op Silver, which was basically a coalition-led operation to take Sangin DC to make it, what it was. It ended up being Fob Jackson in the end, and we were doing a similar job. Me and my Oppo Tomo. We were the lead WMICs. Our jobs when we were leading the convoy, especially cross country, was route selection, because we had some of the artillery guys with the 105s. We had the low loaders. We had we had some big vehicles with us, and it was kind of like it was starting to come back into summer again, because it was like winter, and the ground around there was super boggy. Anyway, we were about 2k outside of Sangin, by the Sangin Wadi, and there was like a big crocodile ridge we were going behind as a bit of cover, and I went off to find like an alternative route, and I dropped down, well below everybody else, and hit like a little shale bed, and my WMIC went over an anti-tank mine and blew the WMIC up. So my wheel got blown up. My sort of like, so if you look at a Land Rover, the passenger side Land Rover wheel went over, which is the commander side. Luckily, I got thrown out like a cat. Don't remember it, but I got when we got blown up. I just remember lying on the deck about 50 meters away from the vehicle, and dust cloud everywhere. I must have landed on my hands and my knees like a cat, because I dislocated my wrist a little bit. I didn't even think about we were in a minefield until I was like, fuck, that was a mine. So I was like, on the floor, look, feel pride all the way back to the vehicle, because my lads were in there. Luckily, I got back to the vehicle. They were on the other side, sat down. They hadn't been injured, but the vehicle was a mess. It had blown the bonnet off. The wheel had been blown off where I was. It had basically catapulted me out the vehicle. So luckily, I didn't have the GPMG like in front of me. Otherwise, probably it was like mangled or tore my legs off or something like that. So I just got thrown completely clear. The lads were all right. But yeah, then I ended up getting Kazivat out of theatre, back to Kandahar, and then back home. The fucking weird thing about this, and I still laugh about it now, is I was home within 48 hours of being blown up. So I was on like the biggest operation that we'd been on, with the Yanks, the Estonians, the Dutch, all that sort of thing, combined coalition force to take down the Taliban and Sangin, go into some serious fighting. And, I was all amped up for that. And then literally, like, I got blown up and I couldn't really do anything. The vehicle was fucked, so there was nowhere for me to go. There was no job for me. But I had like blast damage to my ears and my eyes. And emotionally, I was pretty fucking wrecked as well, because, I'd nearly died. And I got flown back to Kandahar. They operated on my wrist. Couldn't really hear anything out of my ears, my eyes. I just had loads of dust pushed into my eyes because of the blast. And then I basically got flown back to Bryce. Bryce drove me in an ambulance up to Selyoke. My dad lived literally like 45 minutes away. When I was in Kandahar, I had a phone call to my missus and I said, "Look, don't worry. I've been blown up. I'm Kazivat and I'm coming home." So they put my hand in the wrist within 24 hours. So 24 hours I was back in England. Another, 20 hours after that, I was at the front of Selyoke Hospital with my missus with her arms around me, and I was in the car driving back to my dad's house. So yeah, it was mental. No decompression there.
No, fucking hell. I mean, I suppose going back to your family, that might help. Like level your thoughts and that, really. Because going from back to normal life, you're walking down the street. That's just happened to you 48 hours before. Some folks walking past and he's giving you the evil eyes because you're like walking on its side of the street or something. That'll be fucking, yeah. That's going to play with your mind a bit, isn't it?
Do you know what? I don't think it did. The thing that destroyed me the most was the fact that I hadn't finished the tour out with the lads. And literally, because I'd been Kazovac, we were actually 2 weeks after I'd finished the tour. We were supposed to be. I was getting married. We'd organised a wedding. We were getting married in Sri Lanka. We were going to go on a honeymoon to the Maldives. I literally, like, when I landed, I had probably about 3 weeks before the lads were coming home, and I didn't go back to the unit until after leave. So I didn't see anybody until I got back. Until we got back after leave. So I'd got married and all that sort of stuff. And on leave, I'd taken the job, and they'd asked if anybody would want to take Royal Marine recruits through training, because we were the first guys to be in, like, consistent contacts and firefights. I mean, and even though the Falklands was only a couple of weeks long, like, we'd been in sustained contact for months and months and months. So I volunteered to go back and do that. So I literally went back, grabbed my kit, and a lot of the lads had been drafted out or gone on courses. There was nobody about. So I didn't. The worst thing for me was, like, with that, was that I didn't get the closure with the lads to, like, even go out on the piss and have do all that kind of thing, which was, even to this day, is something that I wish I could have done, but it didn't, and there's nothing I can do about it. So yeah, it was a little bit strange, but when I was taking recruits for training, I was a bit angry.
Is that when you became a PTI as well?
No, so I'd done another tour before I became a PTI, and that was one of the reasons why I became a PTI. So when I came back, I took 3 recruit troops through training. So our job was to even though the hierarchy at the Commando Training Centre told us that these recruits are not going to fight in Afghanistan. That's just fucking ignorant. They were, the majority of them were going to go out and go fight at some point. So, I took them through the training, and then after my 3rd recruit trip, I'd had enough of taking nods through, and I ended up joining 40 Commando and heading out on Herrick 12, which was the last op Herrick tour I ended up doing.
Which one was it you got mentioned in dispatches for?
So I got mentioned in dispatches in Operation Herrick 5. There was, outside of Goresh, there was a town called Halibola Kalay, and it was a hotbed for Taliban. So basically, between Goresh and this village was like no man's land. It was about 2K, and if you went into it, you were either getting tortured or beheaded. We did a deliberate operation to drive specifically straight into the green zone and straight into Halibola Kalay, recce by fire, see what happened. But along the route as well, there was a where the Helmand River was, there was a canal, and the canal fed a lot of the irrigation ditches with water to feed the green zone and the farms in the green zone. And anyway, long story short, without dragging it out too much, we ended up driving towards this Halibola Kalay. One of the ISAF workers that had been helping fix the dam had been beheaded, and his head was on basically like a pike, with a note saying, like, this is what happened in Afghani Pashto, whatever it is, like, this is what happens if you work with ISAF. One of the Vikings had thrown a track, so the element and surprise had gone, and we ended up. So me and my mate Tomo, we were like the front 2 vehicles, either side of the track that we were driving into Halibola Kalay on. I was on like an elevated track, and it was like steep sides either side. So, the Wimics, if they went down it, unless they went down forwards or backwards, would have rolled. So there was no sort of like turning back from us. The Vikings were okay because they're tracked vehicles. Anyway, we started driving down this road, and it was dusk. No, it was dawn, sorry. I just remember seeing like these little black dots like on this berm, like literally like 10, 15 meters away. And I was like, that's really fucking odd. And I was like, oh, what would happen if we got contacted now? And like, there's a couple of times where I'd said that in my head, and then the fucking world exploded. You know, RPGs like flew past the vehicle, hitting the berm like either side of us, and tracer and all sorts of stuff pinging off the roll bars in the middle of the vehicle and stuff. Luckily, like none of the rounds actually hit the engine of the vehicle or the tires or anything. Fuck knows how they were so close. They must have been shooting with their eyes closed. But yeah, they ended up firing at us, and then they decided to run away. We fucking just hosed them down. And then from then on, we couldn't, as your SOP, like any soldier knows from PAM 21, is that, if you get into a contact, you either drive through the contact or you fight and withdraw out of it. Yeah, we couldn't do that. We had all the vehicles lined up behind us. We couldn't go forwards either. Well, we could go forwards, but we were like going even further into the hornet's nest. So we ended up getting told to stay put. But so we were supposed to be out on a 10-day up, so we had fucking loads of ammunition on us, like loads of 7.62 for the GPMG. I had a grenade machine gun on at the time, which was like a trial. So the back of the wagon was like absolutely toppers with like grenades, 50 cal rounds in the other vehicles. We had like thousands of rounds. We did it in about 30 minutes.
Okay.
There's about 16 different positions with different Taliban. The vehicles behind us, nobody got out because of the carnage of what was going on. No one could really understand what was going on. And me and Tomo couldn't get onto the radio to send contact reports because it was so fucking loud. Like, it was all round us. Like, from 9 o'clock through till 3. And it was super close as well. And we would literally, like ducks in a barrel. But the rate of fire that we put down, I think I barreled one of my GPMGs, one of my GPMG barrels, because just didn't have time to take the barrel off to put a new one on. So I must have rifled that a few times. So again, it was like Star Wars, like specs. In the vehicles we had an SOP that we would have 1-in-1 tracer for the GPMGs. Well, if we got into a contact like real short and close, instead of like looking down your sights, you could see where the rounds were landing and then just bring it on. It was just something that we did, and it worked. It was really effective. So it was just fucking like Star Wars, man. There's like rounds and stuff going everywhere, and how not, there was only 6 of us fighting against like I think 40 or 50 Taliban in these different positions. We did that for about an hour until the company group got out and started to like go along the canal road and stuff, and then the air assets started coming in. So yeah, basically that's what, in a nutshell, that's what I got mentioned in dispatches for.
I mean, what was going through your mind then? I mean, I know you're going to say it was fucking great. I was loving it, but when it's that intense, do you have time to think, or?
Not really. It was more of a case of, right, where's the next target? You take one person down, you're looking around, right, where's the next one? It was quite funny. I know I say it's quite funny, but it was at the very start of it, because the grenade machine gun was a new weapon system that we'd got given. I remember, like, to the right of us, where the canal road was, there was a bit of an open space where the trees were. And, like in the old Warner Brothers cartoons, there's like a big Warner Brothers water tower with a WB on it. There was a big water tower there, and there was a Taliban insurgent like on that water tower, like shooting at us. And my top cover just turns the gun around and puts a couple of rounds into it. And honestly, it was like something out of like the A-Team or the Fall Guy. Like the round hits the top of this water tower, and this guy just falls over the edge, like spinning, and goes, like falls off the edge. There's like loads of surreal stuff like that, and we were like, "That fucking hell, no way!" That was amazing, But yeah, there was elements at times as well, like we were running out of ammunition. So both me and my mate Tomo, so the vehicle commanders, we got the lads to keep firing with their machine guns on the top. And because we couldn't get on the radio because it was so loud, we had to run back to the Vikings. But because the next Viking was probably about 20 or 30 meters away behind us, to get there, we had to run there. But we were like on the top of this. We couldn't run down the side of the berm because basically like, there was Taliban all around us. So whatever way we went, we would have got shot at anyway. And I remember like he went first, and then I went, and I went back and I was like, look, you've got to fucking turn this round. We've got to get out the killing area. And we're like, no, you got to fucking stay here. So I'd run down there, and there's like fucking dust, like a real heavy rainstorm, like dust spurting off of the ground, like where the rounds are like hitting the deck. God knows how I didn't get shot running there and back. But we got back down there and we're like, right, we need more ammunition because we've done nearly all of our 10-day ammo in like half an hour. So we're like grabbing GPMG link and 50 cal link and running it back up, and we got a couple of lads out the back of some of the vehicles, and they were like crawling up like the little bun lines and stuff, and then like throwing the link back up on the top for us, just so we could get the guns singing again, so we could win the firefight, because we didn't win the firefight till about maybe 3 hours in, and that's when the Apaches came in and just started unloading into the different buildings and compounds and stuff. And later we came back and they showed us these images, and there was just bodies everywhere. There's just bodies everywhere.
Hell.
Yeah, it was pretty horrific.
So when was your last tour of Afghanistan?
10. So Operation Eric 12 was my last one, and that's where I got blown up the most there. So, I was in a place called Fob Inkerman. One of my biggest like fears really was going back out there and being in vehicles again, because I got blown up, on my previous tour, and that's what we ended up being in. But this time, we were in Jackals, which is kind of like a Wimmick on steroids.
Yeah.
But, the time we were in the Mastiffs, and the Mastiffs were an amazing bit of kit, like probably the best bit of kit we had, because driving from Fob Jackson or Sangin up to Inkerman and up and down, we had patrol bases based all along the road between Fob Inkerman, which was, I would say, halfway between Sangin and Kajaki. So we were the furthest with biggest outpost, like right at the top. So our fire support group and all the tankers were based up there with all the vehicles. And then the other the general duty lads, so the other lads, were based in these outposts, like right on the green zone. And you're driving up and down that road was like heavily IED'd, and that's when my tour went from like walking up and down mountains, lining that of the Iraqi desert, driving around the Afghan desert, doing what the hell you wanted, getting into firefights and stuff, to not being able to walk 2K that took 8 hours to do it because there were so many IEDs dug into the ground. And additionally, when those IEDs are dug into the ground, because you can't move that far, the Taliban knew that you would only move in the cleared routes as well. So when they shot at you, it's not like you could dive into the nearest bit of cover, because they might be getting you to dive into the nearest bit of cover so they could blow an IED up. So you're literally just, if you're in the open, you're just fucking lying on the deck returning fire like on an exercise. But you've got, like Murphy's Law, you've got incoming fire coming back at you too. And, it was the most bizarre time ever. And that's when we, what we were talking about previously, when courageous restraint came in, where we sort of like, we've got to deal with hearts and minds as well, but with hearts and minds, what was also happening as well is like, we were trying to be nice to the locals, but the Taliban had some of the kids on the payroll as well. And there was little things like, as well as the IEDs, you'd be driving down the road and you throw sweets out to the kids and like water and stuff, trying to be super nice, and you talk to them. And on one occasion for a couple of days, the kids were like throwing stones at the cupolas of the Mastiffs. And then one day, my top cover, I think he was a guy called Fudge at the time, I can't remember. basically they got us so used to having the stones thrown at us that we didn't do anything about it. Started throwing grenades through the top of the cupola. So yeah, the way that the war was fought changed completely. And yeah, so the other 21 times that I got blown up was because I was in either a Mastiff or a Husky, which is kind of like a one of those weird American vehicles, but but they had like blast plates on the bottom and they were a little bit more heavily armored. And it was kind of like back in the day when you had the crash test dummies, where like you'd hit the button, like the wheels would fall off, or the arms and the legs. That's kind of what these vehicles were designed to do. Like if they got blown up, shit just flew off it, but saved the main compartment. And so it just felt like someone just kind of like giving it a little punch from the bottom. But yeah, it still wasn't nice because you still had to get out of the back of it, getting shot at and stuff like that.
I mean, fucking hell. 22 times. If someone said to me, you're going on patrol with him, so I'm not in a fucking vehicle, I'm not. I'm going nowhere with him.
Well, it wasn't just me. It was like, a lot of the vehicles got shot at. I mean, there was one patrol I went on, and again, this would be a very big. It's a big story in the book. I was tasked to be a liaison with the Americans because the Americans took over later on in Herrick 12, like a lot of the Helmand Valley, and I went on a patrol, basically clearing the 611 of IEDs, and on the first day we were driving back, we were in this big vehicle called a Buffalo. I used to call it a Gruffalo. I don't know why. I used to name stuff, different things, just because it was fun. So we were driving back in this Buffalo. So this Buffalo was an explosive ordnance vehicle where like they'd blow shit up. Now the big like crane on the front of it. And they'd have a couple of vehicles in front of the Buffalo, and it was like mine detectors. So if they found an IED on the floor, it would spray paint it, they would reverse, and then the Buffalo would come dig it up. The EOD guys would jump out the back with some plastic explosive, put it on, blow it up, fucking crack on. And, it was completely different SOP to what to what the British EOD would do. It would take them fucking ages to do anything. But anyway, on the way back, we got 107 rocketed. So basically, I sat in this cab and there was 6 seats in it. And I decided to sit in the middle seat, and the seat in front, the 107 rocket went through the side of the vehicle, straight out the other side, didn't explode inside it, luckily, but just put a hole straight through the middle of the vehicle. And they put another one through the engine block, but we were only about 100 meters away from Inkerman and managed to limp back into camp again. So there was lots of different weird and wonderful things that kind of happened, not just getting blown up, but working with the Americans as well.
So going on to the PTA bit then. It made me giggle when I read that, and you started off this story about how ill prepared and the wrong type of fitness type of thing he had for the Marines. But for you to later become a PTI, that's like turned that on its head as well.
Yeah, well, a lot of my friends, because I was quite heavily into sport and surfing and stuff, and a lot of my friends were PTIs, and there were 5 of them in the same company. So when we got back to when we were kind of slowly making our way out of Afghanistan because the Americans had started to take over. I'd kind of mentally, I'd kind of said, look, I've lost all my cat lives here. I think if I deploy again, there's a good chance I'm not coming home. And I was like, I need to do something a little bit different. So the PTI thing just came up, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to give it a go. And becoming a PTI, you need to learn words of command and stuff. You do like an aptitude, and if you've got the aptitude and you pass it, you get loaded onto the PTI course. So doing the shit I normally do, I just did it off the cuff and did it as fast as possible. So when we came back from Afghanistan, I went on the PT aptitude on my, when you used to have 2 weeks, you'd come back, go away, go home for a bit, come back for 2 weeks, then go on your main pottle. That's how we did it. Basically, those 2 weeks I had off, I went off and did this course, passed it, and then we were. That was in November, I was supposed to have like 3 months off, but I ended up going back in January, getting loaded onto the PTI course, and going through the 17-week PTI course to become a PTI. I'd picked my sergeant's course up, so I was acting sergeant out in Herrick 12 because our troop sergeant at the time had been welfared, flown out. So I took over the role as troop sergeant at the time. So I'd picked my sergeant's role up, but I was like, like I said before, I don't think I can carry on doing this. I want to have a family and blah 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 and all this kind of thing. And I dabbled with doing SF as well. So I'd done a couple of SF aptitudes as well and passed them, but just life got in the way, and I didn't manage jumping on it and doing it. And so yeah, I jumped on my PT course. I was 30 years old, so I was kind of like nearly 10 years older than a lot of the lads that were doing the PT course. And yeah, just I wasn't the fittest guy. I was shit at running still. But I had the mindset of like, I'm just not going to fail it. Physically, like doing press ups, pull ups, and all that sort of stuff, I was always still really strong at. The endurance stuff is what I struggled at. But I ended up passing my my PTI course, and the next 10 years of my 11 years of my career, I was the most self-employed person on the planet in the Royal Marines, I think. Yeah, so I was able to go surfing. I started doing jiu-jitsu, which then led me into opening my own gym now when I left. And yeah, so it was a pretty cool time. So I went from being pretty full-on intense tax firefights and doing the job of what you join up to do to running like the local sports centre and looking after gym equipment, writing training programs for people and pre-deployment programs, and organising adventure training, going on adventure training myself, travelling all around the world surfing and stuff. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
I mean, that took you up to the end of your career. Did you have a good idea what you wanted to do when you left? How did you find the transition?
So about 3 years out, I mean, about 4 years before I left, I'd had enough anyway. So I knew like I wasn't really I was going to do my 22, and that was pretty much going to be it. So I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into the surfing industry, but I wasn't a professional surfer. I'd been a surfing coach for 20 years, but not like a high level one. So that was never really going to work out for me, and I wasn't really going to start a surfing branch. I'd already started a podcast, like talking about surfing and military history stories and grappling and stuff like that. But it was kind of like I did it because I enjoyed doing it. I was not getting paid for it, so and I'm not famous either. So that it wasn't really going to go down that line. And my mum had been a holistic therapist for 25 years, and decided that said that do you want to do, we'll pay for you to go through a holistic therapy course through my business. And I started doing a couple of those modules, and I enjoyed doing it. So that was going to be my business when I left. So I'd done all those courses prior to leaving the military. So by the time I came to do my transitioning, I had about 5 months off because I'd already taken all my course time and done the things I wanted to do. And I signed a contract for a lease for a therapy room, and I started practicing that. And then I went on my terminal leave in the January 22. I was supposed to TX in May, so that was the time off I had. And I sat down had a conversation with a mate of mine who was the manager of SBG Manchester, a really big gym, MMA gym in Manchester. I said, "Why don't you teach jiu-jitsu?" And within 2 weeks, I was like, because I'd taught jiu-jitsu since I'd been a PTI. So every unit PTI job I had, I'd made like a dojo. So I could train. I was training like 4 or 5 times a week. I was pretty into it. Those of you who don't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, it's basically like, if you know what mixed martial arts is, or is the UFC, take the kicking and the punching out, and it's the grappling side of stuff. So it's pretty hardcore, but it's really rewarding. Very, very high skill based sport. But it's super fun and keeps you nice and fit. And anyway, I designed the logo. Luckily, opposite my house there was a youth hut, so the money I got from doing my leaving visit from the sergeant's mess, I used that instead to buy some mats, and that as you say is all they wrote. And for over 4.5 years later, I've got my own properly matted out gym in Exmouth in Devon, and that's my job now with my full pension and the job. I'm getting paid as much as I did when I was in the Corps, and I'm literally working less than a 10-hour week, and it's pretty cool.
All the other time surfing, every chance you get.
Exactly, that's the point.
You've got a family as well. That's going to take all of your time. There was something I noticed when I looked you up about Breathing Oxygen Academy.
Yeah, so the Oxygen Advantage. So when I left, because I was doing so much stuff, I've always been like quite a proactive person, as you can imagine, listening to the way that I'm talking. Is I couldn't get my mind to settle down. Like in the evenings when I was, especially starting your own business and stuff like that. I had no idea how to do any of that sort of stuff. So I was like, my mind's constantly racing all the time about, what I should be doing and all that kind of thing. So I found the Oxygen Advantage. I was doing I was kind of doing sort of meditations in the evening. I was closing my eyes and just counting my breathing just to kind of like prepare myself to go to bed. And I found the Oxygen Advantage and ended up doing an advanced instructor course in that. And it's all about teaching your body to functionally breathe properly through your nose. And by reading the book and then doing the course and then applying it to my practices, like with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I train in the gym like 3 or 4 times a week. I really, and then in the evenings as well, teaching your body to breathe correctly through your nose and not through your mouth. I found there was something really worthwhile in that and helped me greatly. And I decided the best way that I could learn some things by teaching it. So I do the background work and became the instructor, but then by doing these practices and teaching people and reciting the things over and over again, I just decided I learned so much more from doing that by teaching it. And it's something that I do as like a workshop in my gym. I do it primarily for jiu-jitsu, but realistically, you can do it for any sport. I used to have some triathletes that were my clients, some rugby players for Exeter Chiefs. So there was a lot in it. And again, very much so like jiu-jitsu, trying to explain people what it is and why it's so beneficial to you to do it. It is quite difficult. So, but it was really rewarding and is really rewarding, and I still do it now.
So what's your plans for the future then?
Just doing what I'm doing. I've got the book coming out in October. It took me 4 years to write. I originally wrote 200,000 words for it. Publisher Pen and Sword want me to get down to 95. So the book is a vignette of stories of it's kind of a memoir in timeline order, but each of the chapters is a different major story about different things, of contacts, of surf trips, fighting with Balinese gangsters, and lots of different weird and wonderful situations that I ended up finding myself in. And and I was trying to say is I was middle class guy, average bloke. I wasn't like the star of the party or anything like that. I was just a normal bloke that ended up doing some extraordinary things and was in the right place at the right time, and I managed to put myself in that place as well. So that's what the book's about.
And that comes out in October.
Yep, the release date for it is I think the 12th of October. But the pre-sale, there's a link for the pre-sale as well, which I'll happily drop to you.
Oh yeah, we're definitely getting it. We will put it in the show notes. I found the link earlier anyway because I was looking it up. Any plans to do an audio book on that?
There will be, yeah, 100%. I mean, I these earphones that I'm wearing now, I listen to audio books all the time. I'm mega into a bit of high fantasy, so yeah, I'll be whether I do the audiobook, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I want to get that out as soon as possible too.
Well, before we go, what advice would you give to yourself now when you first joined the Marines?
Do the shit you've done. There's no real advice, really. I think the best bit of advice is to learn from your own experiences. It's like trying to advise your own kids and tell them to do stuff. They roll your eyes at you and they're like, "Oh, cheers, Dad." But then when they actually go and do it, they go, "Oh yeah, now I know what you were on about." Always explore. Don't be scared of failing, and do what you feel is the right thing for you. You know, lots of people these days are quite happy to kind of sit back and not change their life because they're scared of doing it. You know, they're kind of stuck in this rat race of doing a 9 to 5 job and scared of doing things that they like doing. And you know, I've worked, you know, did a full career in the Marines and got a pension and you know, did some weird and wonderful things there, and all the things I'm doing now, whether it's with the gym, writing a book. I was shit at English. I've written a book. It's getting published. You know, all the things that I've done. If I can do it, anybody can do it. You just got to put yourself out there and do it, and just not be scared of doing it.
One question from me about the book: what made you want to write it, and how did it make you feel?
I struggled writing with it a little bit because there were certain things. There are stories in there that I've never told anybody, you know, ever. You know, I didn't even like when I sent the manuscript off to different publishers to, you know, try and get the book published. None of my family members or any of my friends had ever read any of it, so there's going to be stuff in there that, you know, I'm a little bit anxious about it coming out, if I'm perfectly honest, purely from the military community, and you know, I don't really care if people say, you know, that didn't happen, because again, the book's written from my perspective more than anything. So you know, I'm quite anxious about that. But writing the book, I did have to put it down a little bit because I became quite vacant thinking about it, because there was stuff in there like about kids getting blown up by IEDs and having to deal with them, and lots of different things, and you know, you shooting people, you know, because that's your job, right? You know, talking about that, which people really don't talk about. I talk about it a lot in the book. You know, being honest with it. So trying to put the honesty into it and make it as unique and individual as I can, and not just some sort of, you know, stereotypical book that's out there where you're just writing a story and you're like, well, I've heard that a million times before. I'm hoping this will be a little bit different. And but yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to write some of the stories in it, but you know, that's why it took me so long to do it in the end.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. I wish you all the luck in the future, and best of luck with the book. And when it comes out, I won't say I'm going to buy it because I don't read books anymore. Or if it comes out an audiobook, I'll definitely be having it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, mate.
Cheers, Andrew.
Right, thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.